You may have noticed by now that all of the examples list more obstacles than advantages. And this is the way it should be. This is going to be the case in virtually all rhetorical situations. And that's because if there was ever a rhetorical situation that produced more advantages than obstacles, then there would be less of a need for the writer to actually write anything. So as a general rule, when analyzing the rhetorical situation of a persuasive text, look for more rhetorical obstacles than advantages. When interpreting rhetorical constraints, it may help to work through each intersection of the Aristotelian triangle. For instance, we could break down the rhetorical obstacles from Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech based on the three intersection points. Let's start with the point that has the most listed under it, the message-audience relationship. And remember, all of these relationships are affected by context. But most of our obstacles came out of what the message is and who the audience is. And that just has a lot to do with the time and place, of course. Yeah, the fact that the audience may be unwilling or reluctant or may not feel empathetic, may not believe change is possible. That's the sort of thing that a predominantly white audience, which America was at the time, would have believed back in the early 60s. And so that is why there's more obstacles coming out of that relationship than at any other point on the triangle. Looking over at the audience-writer relationship, yeah, we do have a big obstacle there, the fact that the audience may not like King because there's those in the audience who hated him at the time. So that is a big obstacle as well. Looking up at the top point, though, we see that we are curiously missing any rhetorical obstacles pertaining to the writer-message relationship. And that makes sense. There's nothing really getting in the way of King achieving his purpose based on who he is and how that relates to his message. And that's because what he's speaking about is not something that is selfish. It's something that's selfless, benefiting everybody. What he's speaking about is inherently virtuous. It's not something that he benefits unfairly from. It's something that he's an expert on as well, having lived through all of these terrible ordeals that you lived through when you were black in America at this time. And so there's nothing really getting in his way there because he's speaking from a point of expertise and on a subject that he is all too familiar with and has a lot of credibility on. So when you're trying to interpret rhetorical constraints using the Aristotelian triangle, look at each of the three intersections and ask yourself these kinds of questions. How does one element affect the other two at that intersection? What key issues exist between these elements? What imbalances are present? And I know those are really big, broad questions, so I've actually created a list of relationship-specific questions and examples on the next slide. Make sure you download that for your handouts.